Welcome to this week's Into the Wilderness podcast. I hope everyone is enjoying the last few weeks of summer. Don't say that.
Don't say last few weeks.
Well, we've had it good. We've had it good.
Almost too good in some places.
Yeah, and it's noticeably getting colder at night.
Well, you were out last night.
Yeah, it was 5 degrees
on top of the hill.
Yeah.
In fact, tell people what you were doing, because it was actually quite interesting. I was asking you about it this morning when we came to the office.
I was catching moths. I was out there with the moth monitor for our area, and we were seeing what we could capture up on the hill. Unfortunately, we only caught 3 moths last night. Not the biggest haul in the world, but it was still worthwhile seeing.
Mainly because it was cold?
Yeah, because it was cold.
But you were saying that he found a moth very recently that had never been recorded before.
In Angus, yes.
Yeah,
in the northeast. They had found the caterpillar and the pupa, but that had been recorded in the 1940s, but the actual moth had never been recorded in Angus, and that was found at the top of Mount Keynes.
Which is very close to us.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe that with all the research that goes on, that it's still possible to do things that haven't been done, or record species that haven't been recorded in certain areas, but it's possible.
Well, he said as well, it's also very possible because there's not many people actually doing it. So
if you want to be a moth monitor, get in contact with the show, and I'm sure we can point you in the right direction.
Apparently there's events around the country, but in particular the northeast, St. Cyrus and Montrose Basin hold events about monitoring and how you can get involved.
Huh. Yeah. Oh well, there you go.
Yeah, there you go. I've got a puppy.
Yeah, we have a new addition to the office. In fact, he's almost about to pull my headset off.
He's got it in the jaws of death. There we go. That's 2 years ago. You probably remember when Floki was a puppy running around the office, and now we have another one that I'm going to pick up and put upside down. Maybe this will disable it. I'm not sure. Oh,
his name.
The teeth are ridiculous.
Is Torrin. He is a sprocker. He's a quarter Springer and 3/4 Cocker, black with a big white patch down his chest, and I bought him for my girlfriend a week ago.
Nice. Very nice.
And he's, of course, adorable and incredibly sweet, but he will be, hopefully, one day, a useful hunting dog, but he's in that very toothy stage where everything is a hard bite.
Everything. There's no, it's like a crocodile.
Yeah.
Clamps down, won't let go. But that'll change, won't it? He's currently in my lap, upside down, because I'm trying to make him stop eating the podcasting equipment. But it's not working too well.
He's largely been good, although I did stand in one of his shits this morning and walk it all on my carpet.
And you had to power wash it.
Yeah, I did. I took my rug outside and power washed it.
Assuming Beth doesn't know about this.
No, she does, because she left for her meeting about the same time.
Oh, that's horrendous.
And she knows about that I was taking a rug outside to power wash it.
Oh, that's horrendous.
So that was how my morning started today. And of course, these things always happen as you're leaving. I was picking up my last bag to take it to the car just in time to get to the office. And I was like, I smell something here. What do I smell?
It's a bit funny. You got to look out for those little curled ice creams on the carpet.
Little landmines waiting.
Yeah, they are.
Oh, dear.
Mines across your...
We haven't had too many of them, fortunately, but he's pretty good when you take him outside to go and do his business. But obviously he must have snuck into the room that he thought was outside.
Enough about puppies for now.
And poo.
And poo. We've had quite a few farmers messaging us with the podcast stickers on and asking for podcast stickers. Cheers guys.
Yes,
I know you guys are working day and night right now to...
I think there's more tractors on the roads right now than there is cars on the back country roads.
And if you see a tractor, just be patient with them.
Yeah, you need to. They're bringing in your food.
Yeah, it is. And farmers, slow down a little bit through the villages. Some of them are flying through my
village.
It
goes 2 ways.
Yeah, it goes 2 ways. Some of them are flying through where I live, and they must be doing 45, 50 mile an hour, and it's a 30 zone. And I'm not being funny, if you're towing a trailer full of grain, your stopping is probably not going to be particularly good.
No. We have actually taken our first pictures of the harvesting season. There was a bit of early harvesting going on, and probably probably about when the last podcast went out.
Yes.
So we put up 1 or 2 of those pictures on Instagram.
But where we live, I mean, around us, we're completely surrounded, and there hasn't really been a huge amount of activity, but I imagine it's imminent in the next 2 weeks.
I believe so. I have it on good authority. Interestingly, I was speaking to a farmer friend of mine the other day because I was trying to find out when he would be harvesting so we can go and take some pictures and video and stuff. And he was saying that it had been so dry that the crops had essentially stopped growing. And so they couldn't even spray them off in some places because there's no point spraying if a crop isn't growing. And I wondered about 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago why I'd sprayed weeds in my garden and none of them had died. And I was very disappointed by this.
They weren't growing.
They weren't growing, and I didn't realise that for the weed killer to work, the plant has to be actually sprouting.
Yeah.
And so because it had gone into a dormant state because there was no water, it didn't have any effect. But now we've had rain, so now I'm going to go and kill all the weeds that are away in my garden.
I don't know if anyone else has seen on the news the state of affairs in Australia right now, where they're having a horrendous drought in certain areas.
They've had to kill a lot of cattle.
Yeah, they are starving. I believe there's a lot of starving animals. Some of our Aussie listeners will be much more informed. They haven't really reported on it that much over here. So yeah, if you know a little bit more, just get in contact with us, because I believe that they're sending trucks full of food and water to go and help them out. But I mean, it
sounds really bad. I did hear an interview with an Aussie farmer yesterday, I think it was. And as bad as the situation was, in typical Aussie style, the first thing you hear at the start of the interview was him cracking a beer open. So things are bad here, mate, but we're having a beer.
Yeah.
But it didn't sound good at all. Now, we have, of course, you're listening to this because we have another podcast. We have Jenna Gearing on today, who is Rob Gearing's daughter. We interviewed Rob at EWA sometime at the start of the year.
Yep.
So you've heard from him already. She was actually in the background helping customers when we did the interview with Rob, but now you're going to get to hear from her herself. Fascinating story about some of the things she got up to as she was growing up in South America. We talk about hunting, we talk about her sculpting, some of the amazing projects that she's been involved in, a bit of life advice as well, I think, in there somewhere.
It is cover it all. No, it's a brilliant show. I'm not there, and it's explained in the podcast why I'm not there again.
It's just unfortunate
it's
series of events.
I have not actually been involved in recording of the podcast. So hopefully in the next 1 or 2 shows I'll actually be there.
Well, maybe not, because you're on holiday next week, and I need to get another podcast recorded.
Maybe not. But we're not sure who's on next yet.
No, we need to work that out.
Yeah, we do.
But before we get to that, we have the winner. Sorry, I just got bitten really hard on the leg with the puppy. We have the winner of the competition from 2 weeks ago, which was to win a brand new edition of the Hornady Reloading Manual. Now, finally, all the stuff for the next, 6 months plus for the podcast competitions has arrived. Boxes and boxes and boxes of it came probably about 2 weeks ago. I know the gent who won the full-length reloading die a couple of weeks back. Sorry, that was incredibly sore on my hand.
The puppy is like a velociraptor jumping around and pouncing on things right now.
He requested a 375 full-length Hornady reloading die, so that got sent straight out from Edgar Brothers to his address. I think he was from Australia, actually.
Really?
I think so. It was definitely a foreign address. It was either Australia or North America. I just can't remember. It was a few weeks back. So that's gone, and this competition was to win the brand new edition. So there's a lot of all the new cartridges and new loads, and some of the new powders are in there as well. And we asked you to show us, I think, what this time of year means to you in pictures.
Yes.
We had a whole heap of entries. We actually had a lot of entries come in before we put it on social because we mentioned it on the podcast, but we're late putting it on social media. But the winner is Paul Cantwell. I think I've got that right. Cantwell, it must be. So congratulations, Paul. Get in contact with the show and we will get that reloading manual out to you. And for the competition for this podcast, something slightly different, and Daryl's going to explain.
So I still need to get the full details on this, but I was sent an email the other day and it was from Paul from Scott Country asking if that we could donate a whole bunch of stuff for a very good cause. It's for a charity auction for an 8-year-old called Alfie, who's been diagnosed with ALD, and unfortunately his condition is beyond a bone marrow transplant, making it terminal. Sorry, there is a dog growling in the background here because the puppy is crawling onto its head. So what we decided to do is this time round for the competition, we were going to donate a whole bunch of prizes instead of giving them out to you good people, and they will go to the charity auction. So they're going to get a whole bunch of reloading manuals and CZ gear, and so I hope everyone is okay with us doing that.
We'll put up a picture of all the stuff, but you can still be involved in it.
Yeah, you can still be involved in it, and the charity auction is going to be organised, I think, through Rifle Shooter Magazine. But if you want to be more involved in it, then definitely check out the Scott Country Facebook page, because they will be putting stuff up about it. Yeah. So more details to come, and we will...
when we put up a post, we can also direct you. We'll get some more info from the guys at Scott Country.
Exactly. This is just this email just came in 2 days ago. So,
but it's going to be a whole heap of great stuff, and it's obviously for an amazing cause. So definitely do get involved.
Definitely.
And that's about all I've got for the show, because I'm being put off a lot by my old dog, who is being chased around the room. He's been very intolerant when the puppy first came, because he's not a big other dog fan, but he's gradually getting more tolerant. But unfortunately, Torrin is chasing him around the room right now, and all Taka wants to do is go to sleep in his bed.
Yeah. That's what happens when you're an old dog, I guess.
He just wants to be left alone.
It is. Well, enjoy the next hour and a half.
Jenna, welcome to the Into Wilderness podcast. You've had one hell of a journey to get here today, because you weren't supposed to be here today. You were supposed to be here yesterday.
Yeah, we managed to come out on, I think, possibly the busiest Friday from the southeast. And it's taken us 12 hours just to get to the Lake District and only cover 350 miles, so that wasn't particularly pleasant.
So we were supposed to be recording this podcast yesterday evening. Well, actually, not even in the evening. We were supposed to be recording it yesterday afternoon in the office with my brother. But since you arrived basically 24 hours later, we are now at my house, which is a little bit away from the office. But we do have beer on the table. So beer is good. What you've headed up over the wall into the north for a family holiday.
Yeah, we're off. The big group of us are off up.
Big Daddy G.
Big Daddy G is up. We're all up after row and some fishing, hopefully. Now we've actually had some rain. Hopefully there will be fish to catch. So
I'm hopeful. I'm trying to work out if I don't need to do work on Monday morning so I can go fish the river instead.
You should.
This is a yearly pilgrimage for you?
Yeah, we come up to Scotland a couple times a year, but we always come up in August for the family bonding session, which is basically revolves around Dad doing his fishing and making sure that he de-stresses, so to speak. And then we kind of fit in around and then have lots of fun, drink too much, eat too much, and get to explore a bit of Scotland, which is lovely.
So he decided that the journey had been so stressful yesterday. He's zipped on up north, hasn't he?
I even showed him the photo of the gin that you sent, and that wasn't even enough to tempt him.
It wasn't. He said no.
I've had enough of this drive now. No, it normally doesn't take quite as long, but it was quite horrible.
Now, we bumped into you in Germany at the early part of this year in March, and we had your dad on the podcast.
Yes.
But we didn't. He was one of those manic shows that we didn't really have a chance to catch up. In fact, we were trying to have dinner the one night, weren't we? And we couldn't even find a seat in a restaurant.
We got half an hour. I literally went in. I had to flirt with this old bloke that ran the restaurant and said, "Please, can we come in and just eat? We're so hungry and so tired." And he said, "We've got half an hour to eat. This is what you're eating." And he literally went, "Here's some heart, here's some sausages, and here's a load of sauerkraut." Shoved it on the table and went, "Eat this."
We actually ended up in the same restaurant later that night, but it was good food. But you had to shovel it in 30 minutes.
Yeah, and there was like 8 or 9 of us sat around this tiny table made for 4, so that was quite entertaining.
We did have a chance to have a bit of a chat around the stand, and one of the things that I wanted to start, it was in my mind to start this podcast with, was rewind time a little bit and talk about your time in South America, because I was intrigued by that, and I didn't have a chance to really dig into what you had done there, but I was intrigued by your experience. How did that come about? I know your dad likes to go there and do a lot of fishing.
Yeah, so when I was about 10, it must have been, it was during the recession, and my dad worked in aviation then, so it's a very different company to what he now works in. And he basically said to my mum, who they were together at the time, let's go somewhere where the pound goes a bit further. And my school were wonderful. They went, sod it, just go. It's an amazing experience. You only get these experiences, very few times come around, let's say. So we went off to Argentina for a good few months and got taken out of school. We're living in Bariloche, and around that kind of area, a bit further south. And I've fallen in love with the country so much from a 10-year-old, and then thought, I left school and I actually wanted to go and join the army. So I applied to Sandhurst, and I did get in and I got my place at Sandhurst. But basically, Dad had said to me, if you want to go off and travel a little bit before you go off and do these things, because I also wanted to go to university and do that whole kind of route, then you need to earn some money, not just pulling pints. So I said, okay, fine, let me give it a go, and I'll try an art exhibition, because I've always done art my whole life. I got a scholarship to my secondary school for it. This can go one of two ways.
What kind of art at that point?
So it was ceramics at that point. So it was clay work, but three-dimensional clay work. And I always tested my teacher's patience by making things that are way too big in too little time and a bit too elaborate. And actually, one of my first big pieces was a life-size war veteran, Henry Allingham, which is now residing in the Fleet Air Arm Museum. So
I've been there.
Yeah, so that was my first public commission, so to speak, when I made that when I was 16, 17.
Wow.
And it's now in there, and also in the Redoubt War Museum in Eastbourne. So I was like, right, this sculpting can go somewhere if I try. Let's give it a go. And so I worked my little nut off and managed to get up enough of pieces that I could have a little exhibition.
So how old are you at this point?
18, I must have been.
So had you already put the military ambitions aside?
No, that was still on the cards. Okay. So I wanted to go to Argentina, come back, and then finish off my application.
You didn't want to do that many things then?
No. But I knew I wanted to do something that wasn't like, it was a little bit more gung-ho than just going off and going to university and then working in London, that type of thing. That wasn't really
following the sheet.
Yeah. So I thought that's kind of ticking all the boxes for me. And so had my exhibition, went way better than I expected, and could afford my trip off to Argentina. And, my best friend and I, we went off, bought a really crappy old car. It was old purple VW. And I think we got through about 20 tyres in 7 months. Something like that. It was just ridiculous. We were taking
just bursting tyres.
Just popping tyres. We were taking this little old Volkswagen Passat on areas you wouldn't go with most pickups,
And probably driving a bit too fast.
Crossing rivers. Like, our car got stuck in a river, and I had to run and get a horse to pull it out. We were in the middle of nowhere.
How many people have had their car pulled out by a horse?
The Volkswagen Passat.
That doesn't happen anymore.
No. But I was kind of, so basically we thought, let's save up all our money, we'll buy a little car, travel down to the remotest part we can find.
So you're 18 years old?
Yep.
And you're in South America with your mate?
In South America with my mate, having the best time ever. And we said, let's go down to this particular estancia. It was a friend of a friend of a friend that recommended us. And we said, look, we don't need to, we want to come down here, we'll work for our keep, but can you just provide us with a bed and the odd bit of food?
The odd bit.
And the first estancia we went on was a hunting and fishing estancia. So they did a lot of reds and it was literally in the middle of nowhere in San Martín de los Andes. And actually, no, it wasn't. It was Junín de los Andes. And the way that the Argentinians work down there is they say, okay, turn right at the big tree, head down there for maybe an hour, maybe an hour and a half. And then turn left at the big next tree, and then turn right at the big stone. And somehow, I have no idea how, we managed to find it. And we were 4 days late.
4 days? Well, that's a little bit more than what you were late here then.
Yeah. Our car had broken down 3 times. We had to have, the bonnet got stuck and we couldn't open it. And then the radiator had broken. And there was just 2 girls. None of us spoke any Spanish at that point. And we were just stuck in the middle of, between Buenos Aires and where we were going, Junín de los Andes, which is quite a long way, in this crappy old VW Passat. Travelled all the way down there and eventually managed to turn up. And they were like, oh, You're the English girls. We thought you might have died. And I was like,
did anyone send a search party maybe?
Did anybody check? And within the first 2 weeks, I broke my phone. I was riding bareback on this horse that I just jumped on and cantering up this hill, and it fell off, got smashed underneath the horse's hoof. And I was going, oh my gosh, the world is going to end. And then after about 24 hours, I was like, this is the best thing
Didn't give
ever.
a shit after that.
No, so Dad just sent me an email on this like dial-up internet and said, just tell me that you're alive every couple of weeks. Send me an email. Go, I'm not dead, Dad, and I'll be happy, and I'll know that you're all right.
What a great liberation, though, to be
was
disconnected from the world like that. Because we're not used to it these days. So we're always we just reach into our pocket and the world is there on your phone.
And we're too reliant on it. And for me, age 18, I'm so glad. I just wish that happened earlier.
So what was you're 25?
24?
24
now.
I have to think about that.
Yeah, no. 24 now. So this
6 years ago.
Yeah, and so I had my 19th birthday out there. And we went from estancia on the first estancia for a month. Then we heard about this other estancia, went there, and the only way to get
are these like
it's like a giant
ranches?
Yeah, I mean a giant ranch. And the only way to get to the second one, again, our car broke down on the way there. And
what were you doing to your car?
Everything.
How did you fix it? I mean, you've broken down 3 or 4 times now since we've been talking. How did you fix it?
We had to get blue tack and putty and shove it under the radiator because it was just pissing down out with water, because we ended up going over this bump that it was a hidden bump. And we couldn't see it because we were off-roading and our VW Passat really, really we shouldn't have been driving there. And ended up going over this lump too hard, and it pushed the whole radiator up through the bonnet. And we could only travel, I think we had about 5 litres of water in the back just in case emergencies. And by the end, we managed to roll it up the hill, drive 50 metres, we'd have to stop, put more water in the radiator, try and push some blue tech putty into it, and then keep going a little bit further. And it was just going, oh my goodness, what are we doing? We're not going to make it there. Managed to find this little tiny hut which had one woman working in it, and she was just making a broth. Turned up there and she was like, oh, you're here then? We're like, yes, but our car is really like on death's door at the moment. And then to get to the actual estancia, it was a 3-hour horse ride. So
no road, no like vehicle road.
Nothing. No, absolutely no nothing. And then they literally just rounded up some horses. We jumped on the back of them and kind of just went off, and then went to the middle of nowhere, and it was just blissful. It was absolutely heavenly. And there it was, you could get on the internet if you had 15 minutes of patience.
Wow.
And after that, it was just honestly.
So what were you doing at that place? What work-wise were you doing?
So it was helping with, they wanted to build this new, kind of like a shack up on the top of this hill. And so we'd have to get up. I mean, they literally said to us, hey, there's a couple hundred horses in that 1,000-hectare kind of, I don't even know what was a corral or what, but go choose the one you like the look of. I don't know when it's last been ridden, jump on it, and then so I was like, yeah, brilliant, this is great. Went, got my belt, tied it around the neck of one of them, jumped on the back and just went off, and obviously it tried to bump me off a couple of times, then we carried on going and eventually managed to get to the gate, used this horse, tacked it up properly, and then we'd go up to the top and bring some shovels with us, and we were digging all of these waterways and stuff on that one for our keep. And then it started to turn into winter because this was come February, March. No, it must have been a bit later actually. Maybe about April time, I think it must have been. And then we had to do a 3-day hike on horseback to the next winter ranch. And again, my friend was driving the car, which had been kind of putty together, and we were kind of holding thumbs, being like, please get to the next place, all right? Because, I mean...
You probably had enough of breaking down by that point.
Oh no, honestly, I don't know how that car survived. But she was driving a little bit too fast on one of these dirt tracks and didn't realise that the back door wasn't closed properly and our bags had flipped out.
Oh, you're kidding?
No, and so we ended up having no bags for 4 days, and then finally, luckily, a gaucho had been riding past, which is like the local cowboys, chucked on the back of his horse. And a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend was like, oh, we found that particular rucksack. And
I can't believe you got it back.
Neither can I. Honestly, I don't know how we survived that whole journey. Then got to the next place. And my friend Amy, unfortunately, had to leave a little bit earlier to go back home. And so I stayed for another 2 months, I think, on my own, and ended up living with this one gaucho called Hugo. And he was like 60-something. And we lived on his island. So that was a how far would that have been? I think it was about 4 hours from in the original estancia we were on. And again, that was turn right at the rock, turn left here, and then eventually managed to find it. Again, God knows how. Turned up at Hugo's estancia and he said, right, we're doing a 3-day cattle ride drive. And he put his horse literally on the back of his old Hilux pickup.
Just walked the horse up.
Walked the horse up onto this pickup. I have photos and you will not believe it. He screwed in these little wooden panels either side of this horse. It was an Anglo-Arab type thing. It was lovely, called Lolo. Popped him up onto the back of this Hilux. We drove for about an hour and I was fast asleep in the passenger driver. Ray knows very well I'm quite good at that. And passenger seat, sorry. And we got to the end. And by this time I'd picked up enough colloquial Spanish that I could kind of get by. And we were driving about an hour on this sandy dirt road. And suddenly I got woken up with this massive thud. And then the whole car started shaking. And I turned around, what the hell had happened? And the whole car had like slumped to one side. And the whole wheel had sheared off. And we were still 3 hours away from where we were meant to be in 3 hours driving in an old crappy Hilux with a horse on the back. And this horse, luckily, was all right. I think he cut his leg a tiny bit or something. Got the horse off and he said, Jenny, you're going to have to canter back. And luckily a mechanic was staying at his house. He said, it should take you about 2.5 hours. And I said, but Hugo, I've driven this twice. I don't really know where I'm going. And he went, no, here's the shortcut.
There's a big tree here and a big rock.
Here's a shortcut through. Take my dog with you and just canter the whole way. And I was like, are you sure?
Dog?
Yeah.
Was the dog going to lead the way?
I don't have no idea what he was expecting. And again, this is all in Spanish. He just said, remember, the palier has sheared off. Just palier, tell him that. And I said, okay. And there was me riding on this horse that I think I'd sat on maybe once with this dog next to me. I didn't know if it was even going to stay by my side. And we just cantered the whole way back. And I think we did it in under 2 hours just. That poor horse carried me like a little saint the whole way back. I managed to find it. Got in my crappy old car, had to go across the river all the way back, pick up Hugo, and then we managed to go all together in tandem and he had to leave the horse behind.
Did you fix the car?
I think he fixed it a couple of weeks later or something like that. So we had to go in my car instead to where we were meant to pick up all the cattle from. And then I sat with him, and we did this 3-day drive. And he just said, right, you sit on that horse and we'll carry on, and you just camp out under the stars at night time and eat whatever. I think he just shoved a goat leg or something on one of the the pack horses, and we just had the best time ever. It was wonderful.
It sounds like adventures that you don't think actually exist today in like this the modern world we live in. That it reminds me of reading the old African books of the guys who went from Mozambique to go and hunt elephants in Zambia, and their pickup would break in the middle of nowhere and they'd make a plan. But you don't hear of stories really like that anymore.
Especially in today's society.
It takes balls to do that as a young woman. I mean,
balls
as a young anyone, but particularly a young woman.
Yeah, and it was quite daunting. I think because I had my nutty friend Amy with me as well. We were both like, "Oh, sod it." We just spurred each other on probably a bit too much than we should have done. And we did get into some uncomfortable situations, but because we were together at the time, especially at the beginning, we did help each other through those things. And then afterwards, I developed that much more confidence as an 18, 19-year-old that I was like, sod it, what's the worst that could happen, kind of thing. And there you do live. I mean, the last estancia we ended up living on was, if you wanted some food, it was a 4-hour drive or a 14-hour trek to get to the nearest village. And you could pick up your rice, your potatoes. We treated ourselves once to an avocado, and it was the best thing in the whole. But if you wanted meat, it was, you have to trek up there, go find a goat, wrangle it in, bring it down, and you have to slaughter it yourself. And they're not going to help you because they just think that you're some pompous Westerner that can't do anything, and you almost have to prove your worth.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah.
And I've been brought up since I was very young. With my dad, who's obviously very keen on the hunting, fishing, very good at teaching us to appreciate where our food is from and all that kind of stuff. But I was kind of a bit like, oh, do I want to be holding this goat while, it makes you appreciate the value of food for me. And
because there's far more involved in putting it on the plate than just opening the packet.
Exactly. And for me, I mean, nothing was put to waste. I made this thing called a pigeon, which is a saddle cloth that you stick over the top of your saddle. And I tanned that whole bloody skin from, I think it took me weeks and weeks and weeks, from a goat and 2 sheep that had been slaughtered while I was there. So we dried them out. So they all got slaughtered. honestly, and this is going to sound absolutely crude and awful, but they served me up the anus. And they went, try this. It's like the colon, the last bit of the colon. And it
lovely.
was just the worst thing. And I was like, I'll sod it, I'll try it.
Yeah.
I'll try everything once. I'm going to promise I'm going to try it again afterwards. But it was...
Have you done it since?
No.
It wasn't good.
I don't think I'm going to do it again.
No.
But I was like, at least I can tick it off and say that I've given it a go.
That part of the animal I won't be eating again.
No. Yeah, I'll save that for someone else can have that bit. But it did make you appreciate it, and you learn. I'd watched the gauchos enough times that I knew what I was doing by that time. Because here in England, you go out with your rifle and you go hunt something. They earn $300 a month, and that's if you're doing quite well as a gaucho. They can't afford rifles, they can't afford this, so they just literally live off the land. And they say, okay, that particular goat is doing okay. It's nearing its food time, and the rest of them they sell, or they chop in a bit of land for a horse, and it's really old style.
It's very bartering and
yeah. And the house that we were living in had no electricity. It had a little river, and they covered the water well with just a load of bristly brushes, and you took that aside and you collected your water. If you wanted to shower, you had to wait 2 hours for the water tank to heat up after you lit a fire. I mean, it was basic living. It was like watching some of those old cowboy movies, and to me it was just perfection, because you've had nothing else to worry about. Simple lives, and if you wanted to contact your neighbour that was a couple 100 kilometres away or whatever, you had to listen to the radio twice a day to hear whether anybody had sent out a newscast for you. So every day we'd sit down. I can't remember what the timings were. You sit down, you'd listen to the radio. Oh no one sent me out a message today, so it's fine. But that was the way that they communicated. There was no phones, no letters, no nothing. It was literally just, we'll listen to the radio, and that's what everybody does. So
and that was living life without all the bullshit, without all the material stuff. Did you miss it?
No, literally I didn't need anything. And I realised that when I then got home, and I had a house full of just clutter and crap, and I had a big old clear out when I got home, because I said, I've just lived out this bag for the last, I think I was there for 7 months, lived out this bag for the last 7 months. All I really wanted, I had a camera with me, so I did take some beautiful photos, and they for me were my memories. They were my little trophies or whatever. And I'm so glad I did at least have that, because I had no phone, no nothing. And I just had literally like a couple pairs of clothes, and if they got ripped, you'd actually sew them up. You wouldn't just cast them aside, because there was nowhere else you could get any replacements. And that, to me, it did make you value what you had, but also made you realise that you didn't need it all. I didn't have a computer, I didn't have an iPad, I didn't have any of that kind of crap. And you just think, I've just lived for this time, and I've been absolutely fine with a tiny bag, a sleeping bag in the back of the car, and the horse that I was riding, and a nice knife. That was kind of all you needed to get by. And I developed this technique. There was a very stubborn herd of goats, and we had gone up in the snow on these horses, and I think we'd ridden about 4 hours from 5 o'clock in the morning. And there was this one particular stubborn goat, and they were just going, this thing is bloody insufferable. I don't know what to do with it. It keeps running off, and it won't follow the herd like a normal goat should. So I ended up canting after this thing, leaning down. By that stage, I was built like the bloody Hulk.
Just from riding
every day. Leant down on my horse, grabbed it by the scruff of its neck and its back end, and hoisted it up onto the front of my saddle. And for the rest of them, and it started baaing like you would not believe. But for the rest of the couple hours, it was sat on the front of my saddle.
Was it pretty chilled out?
It was fine, absolutely fine. And I said, oh my gosh, I hate this bloody
Jenna
goat.
the goat wrangler.
And they went, you're like the bloody Hulk, what's wrong with you? And I think they still use that technique now. So things like that, it was just really cool that they, I'm still in contact with them. They've all got Facebook that nowadays.
They've all got phones now.
Yeah, and honestly, it's almost quite
That's
sad.
Like 5-6 years.
Yeah.
It's changed fast.
Yeah, and they did have these phones. They had these little, a lot younger gauchos would have
Nokia 3310.
Yeah, and it was literally that. But the older ones had nothing. And I almost was kind of saying, it's almost a shame that you guys are changing so much that you are getting onto it.
There is that little part of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it spoils the remoteness of it and the disconnect and the magic. Yeah.
And for me, it was magical. And I remember one evening, a friend of mine had fallen off his horse and he'd left it tied up, and we were having this asado, I think we were eating goat heads or something.
As you do.
Yes, one night. And I literally just looked into this makeshift oven that was this old metal barrel. And I said, what's for dinner? And they'd opened this up and it was just a load of goat heads. And I was like, yummy, yummy.
Can I have the eyeballs, please?
No,
please tell me you tried eyeballs.
Yeah, no, we had everything. Absolutely everything. They just give you a jawbone with a little bit of meat on it and you were like, yummy. And I got left up with his horse, my horse, and a load of other stuff that I had to end up bringing back. And I'm cantering on this moonlight and I was like, I've never felt so free. All the way back to the little cottage thing that we were staying in. And it just was absolutely magical. And I was like, this is living. Yeah, this is living.
I wonder how many people truly feel that these days. And I've had occasions where I've had just kind of what you've described, where I haven't had communication or with home or anyone apart from the people that are around me for a period of time when I've been in different parts of the world. And you do get, after a couple of, especially if you've only just arrived and you're a couple of days into your no communication when we're used to it by the second, you do get to that point where you're like, you know what, this is freedom. We think it's a freedom to be able to communicate with everybody and be able to speak to somebody on the other side of the world at the press of a button, but that in a way is almost
it's a tie down.
It's the opposite of freedom.
Yeah, I panicked when I first dropped my phone. I panicked because I was like, that is all I have. That was my emails, that is my Skype back to home, that is my text back to home. What am I going to do? And then it was literally like 24 hours of going, oh my god, what am I going to do? And then suddenly I was like, this is wonderful, this is magical. And I'd got given this old book from 1980. I think I can't pronounce it properly. It's Shifley's Ride to the Northern, I can't even remember what the blooming name is, but it's basically this one guy who bought a couple of criollo horses down in southern Argentina and then ended up riding all the way up through Brazil and up to South Northern America. And I was like, this is literally what I want to do. This is absolutely incredible. And in my own way, although I was driving from estancia to estancia in the end, in my little crappy VW, I did actually get to experience.
It's like the modern version of it.
Yeah, I could understand where he was coming from, the freedom he had being on his horse, dusk till dawn and living off the land, and and I was kind of like, this is just wonderful. And it's a shame now that people in today's society can't actually experience that, because that is the reason why I now do what I do. It's because I don't want to get into the whole, kind of Star Wars drone effect where you're just kind of following the sheep, following the crowd kind of reality. Things.
You say people can't do it, but there is much less of it because there are arguably no real frontiers left to explore and discover, but there are still places like in South America. I mean, it is still very much like that, although you say the technology is slowly creeping in there now. And I think there's probably a large proportion of people who might read stories like that and think that is so romantic and nostalgic, but
not realistic.
Not realistic, and would they really want to put themselves through it with all the modern conveniences? And I think if people were forced to do it, who maybe would back out after a day or two, I think they would absolutely love it and enjoy it and embrace it for the most people if you've got no choice. But I think that we've almost come, for many people, especially if you have grown up in a community that is pretty removed from the land, which a lot of our big cities are now. We have generations of people who've barely been in the countryside. That's just the way that we moved. I think they would probably maybe read that and think, what an amazing experience, but not necessarily want to participate in it. And that, I think, is sad. And
also, they probably think it'd be completely unrealistic in today's kind of world. I don't think that people actually realise that you can still do that kind of thing, and you can get completely remote, and you can experience what I regard, biasly or not, as real living.
Yeah.
And
I would agree.
I just find it quite sad almost when you go out to dinner nowadays and you've got a whole family sitting around a dinner and they're on their phones. I find that just tragic.
But that is common. That is the default position these days.
Yeah, and I'm such a foodie and I bond with my family and my friends and the people I love over food. Which is why I do the hunting aspect of things, is because I love that whole kind of from point of seeing an animal all the way through to it being in my mouth, it is, I've done every single thing of, I've done it with my friends, or I've done it with my boyfriend, or I've done it with whatever it may be. And you have been a whole part of that, and you have then sat round and you've not included your blimmin' phone, you've not had the technology, you've just gone out and you've done it.
Yeah, I suppose the society we live in now is really a society of convenience, because even small things, like if we look out my window there's a pile of uncut wood which I've gone and collected, and then there's cut wood in the woodshed which I need to fill up before winter comes. Unless you've cut your own wood, you cannot appreciate a warm house in the same way. I don't care what you say. Oh no, I appreciate it. It cost me money to fill the oil tank. No, I'm sorry. Unless you've had to stay warm as a result of the sweat and tears of going and getting wood in the middle of winter when it's bloody cold, which is just bad preparation, then you don't fully appreciate it. And there's so many parts of our lives these days, if from food, like you were explaining there, to heating, to even shelter, which we take for granted and don't fully appreciate until you go back to a stripped down society like your experience in South America, or some of the time that I spent in Nepal or India. You got to go to those countries, but not as a tourist as such, as one of the natives. You kind of have to be native.
Yeah, 100%.
You have to be there long enough to be one of the natives in order to fully experience it. I think there's a lot of people I always say to people, it's very easy to go on holiday to a country and think a place feel like you've experienced it and a place is awesome. But imagine actually having to live and work there. That's how you appreciate what a country is like.
Which is why you actually have to often spend the time there to actually meet the people and be accepted by them, and actually start in their what they do day to day, not just what they're doing to entertain you for the week.
Yeah.
Because when I got back from Argentina, I ended up living, and I'm in the southeast of England. I'm in where I live, and everything is at the your fingertips. If I want to order something, it'll be there next day on Amazon, or I could pop out to the shops anywhere. And I am in the countryside, granted, but still
it's nearest town. It's not that far away though. Yeah.
The nearest town's only a 20-minute drive. And I got back and I was living in this tiny little cottage, and I mean there was a photo, it's hundreds of years old, this little cottage. No central heating. It had a little log burner downstairs that Dad and I fitted, and a little open fire upstairs. And again, we'd have to go out. We got the old Series 1, shoved wood in the back of it, and we chopped it all down and prepared it and filled the log store with it. Grant, I did order a bit of coal, not gonna lie.
I have a little bit of coal. It supplements my wood.
But I managed to keep that log burner going for 3 weeks straight without it ever dying, because
what an awestle satisfaction that is.
Oh, that was good.
When you wake up in the morning and the embers open the grate.
And there's nothing like natural heat coming off a fire, and I can't stand radiators now. And everyone comes into my house and goes, "So bloody cold." I'm like, "I'm sorry, I just don't like radiators."
Put a jumper on.
Yeah.
People are soft. The snowflake society, if you to use a common phrase these days.
And it was such a pleasure having that, and it was again the satisfaction of coming back and having my little log burner there, my little open fire upstairs that I knew would only last, if I really got it going, would only last 5 hours. So I'd wake up in the morning being bloody freezing again. But at least that was, I felt like I was doing it for myself, if that makes sense.
So how is your return to normality, for want of a better phrase, having returned from that? Because that kind of experience, if I'm to project my own experiences I've never done quite as long a stint as you've done, but they do shape you. Those kind of experiences shape and change the person that you are a little bit. How did you react to that when you came back in terms of the direction that you wanted to take forward?
It was almost a bit of a slap in the face coming back, because I flew straight to New York to see my family.
Oh, wow. That's a complete reversal.
I know. And I was going, what on earth?
You needed rehab in between.
I did. And I got there and I was going, oh my goodness, what on earth is going on? It's too noisy. There's just so many bloody people.
There's lights.
Yeah, the lights, everything. But actually, we're only there for 24 hours, and then we flew to Persuing, which again is in the middle of nowhere. In Canada, it's an Inuit population. So I'd gone from Argentina to almost a similar layout of life, where we're out in Persuing and you'd flown in this little twin otter over to where these Inuits stay. And again, there was women walking past whale heads, and they'd use that whale and they'd fed the whole community.
Yep.
And there's people going, oh, whale hunting's evil and this, that, and the other. Yes, in certain circumstances, I do agree it is. But the way that they do it, they feed their whole community with it, and they eat everything. Yeah. I mean, some of the stuff I've eaten with the Inuits is absolutely just out of this world crazy. And I can't remember what it was called, but there was this fermented seal blubber that they served us up once. And I said, I'll try anything once. That I will never go near again. It was just awful. They loved it. And what I thought was quite funny was Dad had gone out there, and the first time I'd gone out there, I think I was about 14. Dad was working with Air Inuit at the time, and we'd flown over, and we were living there, and they'd flopped this raw caribou leg on the floor on the ice, and staying in the igloos at night time, and we just cut off a little bit, eat it raw, and it was delicious. It was amazing.
Completely raw, not dry cured
raw,
or anything.
Nothing. Completely raw. It was just a bit frozen. They'd whip up these fish, and it was fresh sashimi, and we had ptarmigan there.
Yep.
That was raw as well, but they'd cook the stomachs. Well, the corn pouches. They weren't the stomachs, the corn pouches. And they'd eat that. And what else? And then there was the whale that you'd chew on. That was raw as well.
I've had whale before, but I didn't eat it raw. It was very good.
Yeah, and it was delicious. It was very nutty, shall I say.
I found it a bit livery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this fermented seal blubber wasn't particularly.
It doesn't sound very tasty.
It was just smelled like death. And so we went out there, and we were there for I think a couple of weeks, and we were fishing for Arctic char, and that was hot smoked, and it was just incredible. And so that at least kind of gave me a little bit of R&R, let's say, in between it, and then going back home again. But their lifestyle again is incredible.
Yeah, that's amazing. I've had little inklings of that kind of culture, but not fully, not the full experience of the Inuit culture.
But again, it's modernising a lot as well. I mean, from the first time I went out there, age 14, till the last time I went there a couple of years ago, it had changed so much. They've all got TVs in their houses, and they've all got this, that, and like all of these modern technology things, and you're like, what? It's such a shame almost. And I understand why they're so separated, but they had such a lovely community feel. Yeah. You kind of think it's such a shame almost.
It's this weird dichotomy that we have where everybody is striving for progression, and we in the more Western world that is industrial revolutions past, and we're in the most sort of advanced societies in the world, feel for some reason that societies and cultures that are behind us in terms of their sort of evolution want the help to catch up. But do they really?
No.
I mean, you look at...
I envy them more.
Yeah, I envy them more. You look at pictures of very remote Amazon tribes, and they're the happiest people in the world. And you hear people turn around and say, "Oh yeah, but life must be so hard because they have to walk down to the river and collect the water for themselves, and they've got to make their own houses and refix the thatched roofs, and they've got to go and hunt their own food." And I understand why people think that. And yeah, that's a lot more difficult than opening the tap like we would do here and suddenly I've got water. But that is their day-to-day life. They don't have all that superficial shit that we have, that we need all this convenience so that we've got time to go and watch Coronation Street.
And it's a lot more living satisfaction, I'd have said. And from experiencing both of them, I would rather pick up that lifestyle any day.
It's quite arrogant in a way that we perceive that their lifestyles should be more like ours.
Yeah, and I'd much rather go back to that.
So would I.
And I almost hope one day
think I was born at the wrong time.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I'd rather be going around on a horseback and living off the land, and I think that's the issue we've got into now is from living off the land 100 years ago, 150 years ago, whatever it may have been, and that was the way that we lived, Whereas nowadays, you go into the supermarket, you pick up whatever you need, you order stuff off Amazon, you order this, and everything's at your fingertips, but it's actually not particularly satisfying. You've not done anything for yourself. You've ordered your wood in, or you've turned on the radiator, or, it's not actually...
I always think of it as I'm always hunting for life stories. So you buy something that you think is making you happy, and I'm guilty of this as well. I buy a new rifle because I think it makes me happy, and it does momentarily. But how many of the things that we do today in modern society and purchase as part of our sort of strive for happiness are stories that are worthy of telling? And if you sit around a dinner table and have conversations with people and you're interacting and telling interesting stories, it is always about life experiences. How many people are going to talk about that I might correct myself here. I was going to say, how many people are going to talk about that awesome time they went out on Friday night and got pissed? But I actually know people who will recount particular times they got hammered. But it's a bullshit story. It's fun to do that every now and then and let loose and go and drink a bit too much.
And we're all guilty of it.
And we're all guilty of it. But if I think about the highlights of the things that I've done, it has always been those slightly off the wall, it's far removed from this sort of modern world that we live in. And those are the stories that stick with me. And when I are telling people over dinner or conversing stories over a beer, those are the things that people find fascinating. And that's why I wanted to speak to you about your South America experience, because that is going to be way more fascinating than the day-to-day in your cottage in England. With no disrespect to your everyday day-to-day cottage in England.
They're the ones that set you apart from normality.
It does. And normality is overrated.
Yeah, I completely agree. And the more weird and wonderful things that you can achieve in one's life, I think it makes it way more exciting. And I want to continue doing that. I want to go back to Argentina. I want to go explore other places, and I want to go and do things that aren't requiring a bloody mobile phone. And I'm guilty of it. And I get stuck. You get stuck to your mobile phones. You get stuck to your technology, and actually, you don't get any. It doesn't give me any kind of warm fuzzy feeling inside.
I heard someone say something recently, so I'm not sure who I'm stealing this off, but it isn't my own. So you want to live a life where you're common amongst uncommon people.
Yeah.
And that is, looking for the things that really mean something. Because the vast majority of people, sadly, I honestly believe that the vast majority of people in Western society never truly live anymore.
No, I'd agree.
And that's a sad reality.
What was lovely was when I was with the Inuits that time, and my dad had said, I'm a bit fed up of eating all this raw stuff all the time. I just need something a little bit more westernized. And he went into the local, I say supermarket very lightly, a little tiny shop. And,
so the dog's peeking through the window wanting to be part of the podcast. That was a distraction.
And he headed up and he got some of that awful plastic cheese, the stuff that you rip out of the packets, and he stuck that in between two loaves of kind of Hovis bread. And then gave it to one of these Inuit guys. And the minute he took a bite of it, he threw up.
Really?
And I was like, that's crazy. I mean, just all of this kind of processed crap.
That's
and
not
he's
good
so
for
not
us.
used to it.
Yeah.
And the body was just like, immediately, don't want this in my system. And that is quite telling, I think, that, some of the stuff that we're putting into our bodies, whether it be food or whatever it may be, that we're just so used to it now. And almost we should go back a bit more simplistically.
I think there's a very good reason why increasingly we are facing food intolerances. I was actually talking about, I think it was with my brother actually the other day, and he had read the piece, so I can't really give you much more input. If he was here, he would tell you. But we, as a Western society, are increasingly have food intolerances, and I think a lot of that they've put down to this processed food that we tend to eat all the time. And it's not necessarily very good for us.
I've noticed a lot, even between my generation, and I'm saying I'm 24 now, and my sister's and my sister's generation and her friends, a lot of them have these little allergies and they have all kinds of issues and eczema and this kind of stuff. And even in my day, which wasn't that long ago, I know, but us country kids were outside playing with chickens and animals and
not washing your hands,
and probably eating all kinds of horrible things. And we were always filthy and running around and playing outside. And now all these kids are playing on their iPads inside. You kind of think, well, I wonder why.
Yeah, it's definitely going to make a difference because you build up those tolerances, to bacteria and dirt and just the normal shit that you would come into if you were to walk along a river line. Which is what we used to do as a kid and play in the stream and make little dams. Just normal kid stuff, or it was normal for us when we were growing up. But you're right. If you spend most of your formative years going to school and coming back and sitting on your iPad, it can't be good for you. And I was actually even reading something that was actually in National Geographic the other day. It was a fascinating, really long article about sleep and how this advent of smartphones and tablets is ruining our sleep because we have this backlit screens that we're going to bed watching all the time. And there's some pretty strong studies that have linked loss of sleep to early onset dementia.
Wow.
Because because of a chemical process that I can't remember. That I read. But it's basically to do with your brain relaxing overnight, and we're not getting the same. We're actually getting, I don't know, was it a decade? I think we're getting 2 hours on average. We're getting 2 hours less sleep a night than a decade ago.
Blimey, and that is quite a big old difference.
It's a huge difference, yeah. And so we're starting to see the effect of that in our society now.
And it's like, and again, with if you're going back to the food industry and stuff like that, everything now is pumped full of hormones and chemicals and, you know, antibiotics and anti-salmonella this and anti-whatever that.
Colouring.
Yeah, and you just kind of think, I mean, salmon, for example, shouldn't really be that colour.
There's a rabbit hole.
Yeah, and you just kind of think, I'm not surprised that we find, because we've been so kind of prone and just shoved on the straight and narrow, and this is what you meant to eat and this is what's socially acceptable. No wonder then people who aren't educated about it think that us going out and taking one deer off the land is then actually really evil and really like not accepted by society. Yeah.
And it's not generally.
No, it isn't. It really isn't.
Especially not here in the UK.
In the UK, yeah. Especially here in the UK.
I want to get to the hunting side just shortly. I want to just carry on the timeline now. So we got to your cottage, you're back, you've kind of acclimatized again.
Yeah.
So at some point we must be getting to what is now your business and livelihood, which is your sculpting.
Yeah,
Let's
so
come back to that.
I came back, and while I was away, I was contacted by the Fleet Air Arm Museum, who had obviously already purchased the first sculpture of Henry Allingham. And they said, well, we'd like you to do one of Eric Winkle-Brown, Captain Eric Winkle-Brown, who was revered as Britain's greatest test pilot. Incredible man. He's flown the most amount of aircraft out of anyone in the world, did the first jet landing, and records that aren't ever going to be broken again. And they basically said, we want you to sculpt him from kind of 1940s depiction around that era. And I was 1920 at the time, and I'd got the email when I was
incredible
away.
Privilege.
Yeah, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is incredible. Maybe actually I could do something with the sculpting thing. And while I was when I got back, more people said, oh, we wouldn't need to sculpt our dog, and I'd sold a couple of roe deer heads that I'd made.
I love your roe deer heads.
And so I was like, this could actually be a goer. We've always been put on the straight and narrow from schools, and you've got to go to university, and you've got to do this, and you've got to do that.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And I had been told, oh, Jen, you're a bit of a wildflower here. I think you ought to go to university just to kind of steer yourself a bit. And I was like, why stick to convention here?
Yeah.
If I want to go to university, I can go when I'm 50.
Good on you.
So I carried on with the army application, and I got my place. And then they said, oh, actually, now you can come up to your 30s. So I was like, okay, don't need to rush that one either. Let's just put that on the back burner just for a minute. Let me just explore the sculpting thing. And as the months and years went on, I was getting more and more work, and it was getting more exciting, and bigger commissions were coming. And on my 21st birthday, literally on my birthday, I had that. Captain Eric Winkle-Brown's bust was unveiled, and BBC's Kirsty Young came out with a birthday cake, and they were like, happy birthday, also this is being unveiled. And I was like, this is the best 21st ever. I can't have asked for anything more cool. And then after that, I just wanted to do more, and I was always being told, oh, you're too young to do that, you're too inexperienced. And I was like, watch me, I'm gonna try and prove you all wrong. And here I am.
You must have had great support from your dad, though, to not be pressured down the university route, because I know exactly what that is like, and there's an expectation both from family and also from school, from education. But you'd had a bit of time out of the education to kind of remove that pressure of it to do exactly what you've just described, that sort of set in stone route. If you're half decent at school, you go to university. there is no other choice.
Yeah.
But
and I got told by one of my teachers, I don't even think you should go on a gap year. I think you should go straight to university, because otherwise you're not ever going to go. Yeah. And I was like, you know me too well. And I'm glad I didn't listen to that. And my headmistress has come back since and been like, I'm so glad you didn't, and I'm so glad you did what you did, because otherwise you wouldn't be here now, doing these fantastic sculptures and whatever, and living the life that was really made for you, because I wouldn't have suited that kind of path. Dad was fantastic, and he just said, Jenna, there's no bloody time frame on these things. Go when you want. My mother was a little bit opposite. She was like, I think you should go. And I was like, nah, I won't listen to you. And so, I just kind of did what I found, what felt right. then just carried on kind of pootling along and probably doing things that I was probably too inexperienced for, but I pretended that I was.
But you just made it happen.
And I just, yeah.
I think that's a great life experience lesson to people. We have a lot of younger people listening to this, and we've covered sort of. I can't remember who it was we had on the podcast. It was a bit of a. Oh no, I know who it was. It was Kim Hughes, GC. Who was on a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking through his early life and sort of his life decisions and sort of life lessons and advice for younger people is do what you're passionate about, because I think one of the other great failures of the landscape and world that we live in now, not just in this country but in most of the Western world, is this regimented structure of expectation, which is just so much BS. You do not have to, and I've been through the university system, and it was fine. I wouldn't change anything because I wouldn't be sat where I'm sat right now, and I love what I'm doing. But if I was to rewind time, I probably wouldn't have done any of it. So I'm kind of contradicting myself, because I'm saying I wouldn't change it, but I would change it. Who knows what path I would have been on, and you made completely the right decision, obviously, because of where you are now. But I think that needs to trump everything else, is be passionate about something and drive towards something that you want to do, rather than what everybody else expects that you should do.
I completely agree. And I was always kind of, I think I was probably a teacher's nightmare in the sense that I was always a bit more kind of, oh no, it'll work, it'll be fine, like everything will be all right, and we'll kind of push our way through these things. And I ended up, I find it quite sad almost that a lot of my friends have gone, it's a be all and end all if we don't go to university. And I am going to work in London for a couple of years, and then I'm going to move back down to Sussex or Kent.
That was me.
and that's just life. That's the way that it works. Yeah. And I was like, why does that have to be the case? Yeah. Why do you have to just stick to these formalities and stick to this kind of confirmation? And now, kind of a year or two later, they're all going, oh, I just hate the city. I can't do this anymore. I want to be back in East Sussex or back in Kent.
So many people end up down that road. And that was my very naive thinking as well. I left school a year early, so I was 16 years old when I left high school. And I got my place at university. So I was 17 by the time I got to university. And my great ambition was to go study economics, become a fund manager, and retire at 30. I'm 31 now, and I'm definitely not retired, but I managed very quickly, having done exactly what I wanted to do, pretty much, apart from a little visit away from university before I finished. I got the job in the city that would have taken me down that route. And I worked in London and other parts of the world in finance, and that's where I would have gone. A lot of the guys who I worked with at the time, that's exactly what they went on to do. They're fund managers in London right now. And I don't know any of them that truly like their lives.
Or
really,
truly seriously happy.
Yeah, well, that's exactly the thing. I got one old swimming friend of mine who I had no idea at the time, back when we were like 12 years old, that he actually liked field sports. I guess we were too busy racing and competing against each other. But he lives there now, and he's got a very good job for a big company. But the one thing that he wants to do all the time is work his dog and go hunting. And I do that when I walk out my house every day, but he lives in the middle of London. So he's always, and a lot of those people there are striving for a future where that's what they can do. And that's what I thought I was going to do. I was giving away that part of my life so that the later part of my life, I could do that every day.
And you get into that city ambition where it's as long as I work really super hard now, when I'm 50, 60, I can retire, and then I can do...
And then do all that stuff you want to do.
And I do that every single day of my blooming life. Yeah. And my dogs come everywhere with me, and I can pick up my gun whenever I fancy, and take myself off into the countryside and do what I want. Yes, I work hard too, but equally I can play really hard. And that for me was kind of... it is almost a shame when your friends go and they work in the cities and they try and convince themselves by convincing you that their jobs are the best thing since sliced bread, and then a year later they go, oh, actually this is an even better job and I'm here now.
Yeah.
And you're like,
it's this continual cycle of searching for this perfect ending
that never actually
really materializes. And one thing that I've certainly learnt in the last couple of years is you really have to join. There's nothing wrong with searching for a sort of a perfect or the future that you're trying to strive towards. Everybody has to strive towards something, otherwise you'd never really make any progress. But you have to enjoy the journey.
Yeah.
And if you are not enjoying the journey to get to the end result, then I think you need to probably have a really serious evaluation of your life.
Yeah.
Because most of it's the journey. In fact, arguably all of it's the journey. So
Yeah.
if you can't enjoy that part of it,
Yeah, I mean,
what are
where
you doing
does it
it for?
stop?
Yeah.
Where does it stop otherwise? And where is that? If you're going from A to B, where is that B point? You wanna enjoy the.
because you'll never be happy.
No.
Like eventually when you get there, I know there's so many examples of this. I can actually think of a guy who's long since dead now, and he lived that life of continually trying to just do that one more deal, work that one more year, and then he had a heart attack at his desk at 50.
Yeah.
Or I think he was actually even a wee bit younger.
And it's such
So
a
he
shame.
never got to the end, and I don't know how much of the process he actually enjoyed.
There's that really incredibly kind of hard-hitting story of, and I can't remember who it was, and I can't remember if I'm even going to relay it properly, but a guy was sitting in his plane and it was going down and it was crashing. And the last thought he had to himself was, oh my goodness, I have a cellar of wine that I've been saving for the perfect moment, and I'm never going to bloody drink it now. And actually survived the plane crash and went home and went, sod it, I'm going to open up this really nice bottle of vintage wine because I could be dead tomorrow and I could, why not enjoy this journey when I'm looking for that final, at the moment I've just been looking for that final potential perfect moment and I don't even know if it exists.
Yeah, maybe it doesn't.
So-
And that's always my excuse when I buy another Land Rover.
Yeah.
Because you've got to live in the moment, right?
Or I buy a bottle of wine that's too expensive.
So your sculpting has, I mean, it's grown and grown and grown. I mean, recently you've done some freaking awesome stuff. I mean, the Jim Corbett story, we talked a little bit about that with Mark, I think, when I interviewed him in Ewa, but just tell how that came about, because a lot of our listeners to this podcast will have heard us talk about Jim Corbett with a few other people in the past.
Yeah, I've been incredibly fortunate in my relatively short career and the fact that I am so young, but I have worked hard and I have kind of put myself out there quite a lot. So I've been this year that just came about, I sat down with Mark Newton from Rigby and I said, Mark, I've got this really cool idea and you've got some amazing Rigby heroes, inverted commas, the people that have shot with Rigby.
So this was your idea?
We were chatting about it at Gaucho, the restaurant in
Yep.
London.
I've been there once.
Yeah.
A friend of mine bought me dinner there.
Yeah, and Dad was there talking about a new Rigby bipod, which is going to come out later this year. And actually, I put that idea into Dad's head. I was like, you need to make a bipod for Rigby, and it needs to be all leather clad and really sexy and really kind of my kind of style thing. And I'll help design it for you. And I said to Mark, I've had this idea, and I think it would be really cool if we worked together on this. And he went, funny you should say that, because I've actually been thinking about kind of honouring the Rigby heroes, and maybe we should go down this route. I can't remember the initial idea, and I can't remember what it was, the actual, the spurring on moment for this was, but we ended up getting let's do a Rigby Heroes edition. So I've started off with Jim Corbett, who obviously is incredibly famous for his tigers, and he's got
Man-eating tigers, yeah.
Yeah, and so one of the most kind of moving stories, I suppose, is the Chalgar tiger. And I said, well, wouldn't it be incredible to capture that particular moment? And obviously you have his rifle that there's 275 that he shot that actual animal with.
I have held it. Yes.
Yeah, and it's absolutely beautiful. And still, over 100 years later, it looks like it's barely done any blooming work. And you think the amount of things that
the stories
behind
could
that gun. And so I thought, well, I'm going to sit there and make this, and I'll come out to SCI with you. And
this was last year, wasn't it?
This was the year, yeah.
No, this year.
This year.
This year.
And it won't be ready, but I'll be there and I'll be a good storyteller. And I know most people that go there anyway know about Jim Corbett because he is such a hero to so many people. And that can be the start of our Rigby Heroes edition. So
great place to launch it.
Yeah, and I hadn't got it ready and it wasn't finished and it was just literally a kind of few smushes of clay together. And now finally I've got it cast. Edition.
Does it look
one.
like Jim Corbett?
Well, I hope so.
I haven't seen it. So.
But kind of desk. Oh, you have to have a big desk for it. But desktop size. It's an edition of 8 because he shot it at 8 paces away.
It's the classic scene that's on the front of his book, isn't it? Where you see him and he's got the rifle up and the tiger's there.
Yeah. So the story was absolutely incredible, and he'd been searching for this particular tiger for ages, and it killed so many people, and months and months and months had gone by, and he was going through this. He'd killed its child, or
cub,
cub, I can't think what the blooming word was. It's cub, which wasn't actually a cub, it was just a kind of sub-adult type thing. And the lion, tigress, should you say, had no claws and had a chipped tooth, and so obviously humans were a much easier prey for it. So, it was just living.
I think it had a big abscess, didn't it? Yeah.
And it wasn't in best of shape. And he had been going after this particular tiger for a really long time, and then was going through the jungle, and on his way through, picked up these eggs, and he wanted to add them to his collection.
I love this story. Yeah.
So he had these 2 little eggs in his hand. One of them was much rounder, and one of them was much more oblong. And they were in his left hand, and in his right hand he had this 275, which is arguably quite a small caliber.
Yeah.
And anyway, came across in this river ravine, across this tiger just laying down, staring at him. And they do arguably say that these eggs actually saved him, because if he maybe had his left hand, he'd have put his hand up to the gun much quicker and might have spooked the tiger a bit easier. But he said, I don't know how long it took me to spin around with my right arm outreached, holding this rifle. And holding a rifle with one hand isn't the easiest of things if you try it. And a lot of people do when they come to the Rigby stand. They kind of put this priceless rifle out with one hand,
trying to reenact it, yeah. And
then shot it. And this story, I think, is just so fascinating.
It's okay. Your dog's just eating some leftover vegetable cuttings out the window,
staring at us. And I just thought that was such kind of a magical scene, and such a
so does he have does your sculpture have the egg?
So he's got the eggs in his hand.
Incredible.
So I mean, it is it's not massive by any means. It's quite little, and I made it with literally dentistry tools because I wanted it to be something you could have in your house.
Yeah.
And so the first one went to the gentleman that bought the Corbett edition rifle that went at auction.
The auctioned one, yeah.
Yeah, a couple of years ago. And so I just think that's so magical that his then scene depiction in bronze is now with that rifle that's also got the scene depictions on it. So 4 of them have now gone, and now it's finally cast. I can actually show the other people that were interested what it's now going to look like as well. So it's been a really fun project to be involved in. And obviously SEI for me was fantastic because I do a lot of work along that kind of route with my dad, with Spartan, and obviously a lot of my clients are from that industry anyway, because they're so passionate about the animals and about these wonderful stories of these hunters and that kind of thing, that the two go really hand in hand nicely. So that, hence the roe deer and chamois and this kind of sculptures like that. So
you're not going to be changing career direction anytime soon and going back to university?
I'm not planning on it, no. No, really not planning on it. Because that whole army thing was, you were saying about the university thing, and a lot of people it does suit and it does mature. And I remember I was told, it's very unlikely that you're going to get your place offered, at Sandhurst because you haven't had the experience. And I was like, let's just see about that.
Look at my life experience.
I'll tell you my stories and you can tell me yours. Yes, you've gone out for a lot of drunken nights and you spent 4 years or 3 years at university, but actually the life that I've lived has been way more kind of
real.
Yeah.
Arguably.
Yeah.
I mean, there are things that to qualify the university statement, there are things, if that is going to be your career direction and your passion, you have to go to. If you want to be a doctor
or an engineer,
you've got to go to university to do it. My cousin's a doctor, used to live here but now lives in New Zealand, and he changed his career actually from engineering to that because he found a passion, and you have to do that. But
it's nice to know it's not the be all and end all for everybody.
I think the main thing from that is don't feel that you have to do it if you think that there's something else you want to do. So what's coming up for you in terms of, have you got any other big... Oh no, hang on, I tell you, there was something I wanted to ask you about that is now in the past, is you had one of your bronzes auctioned for a very large amount of money for a very good cause.
Oh,
which is an incredible story. I mean, I was blown away by the amount.
So I was contacted by Towergate Insurance Company back in... when was it? I think it was September last year. And it was this particular gentleman, he phoned me up and he said, I've been following your sculpture career for a while now, and I don't know how they found out about me or whatever, and I'm sure there was plenty of other more qualified sculptors that they could have chosen, but they said, you're a young, enthusiastic sculptor, and we'd really like you to be involved in a particular project. And it was after the Manchester bombings back in May last year, and he said, I've come from a tiny little area in Ireland where, our community is everything, and we don't have very much, or we didn't have very much, and we didn't have everything accessible. And this particular girl had come from Barra, so in the Hebrides, and it's 1,000 people on this island. The only way you can access it is either by a 6-hour ferry, I think it is, or you fly over and you literally land on the beach, and it's the only beach landing in the world.
Yep.
And it is incredible, beautiful place.
You've done it, have you?
Yeah, no, 3 times, I think.
Amazing. I've never been.
No, you must. You really must. And so they said, well, we want you to do a kind of commemoration for her because unfortunately she got killed in the Manchester bombings. And for me, it was quite hard-hitting, he said, because he had also come from a very tight-knit community, and how such a tragic story like that affects a community so small, and where everybody still, like almost like olden days, where still, you know, you help out your neighbour, and you are.
Yeah, it is actually a community.
Yeah, and you know your neighbours, and you know the people living next door to you, and I think that's so lovely. And that was what I was used to back in Argentina and with the Inuits and that kind of stuff. It's you get used to that really strong community feel. And so I said, well, before I do anything, I want to fly out to Barrow and actually meet her parents and just discuss with them what they feel is appropriate and what isn't. And I flew out, and they were absolutely wonderful and so hospitable and so excited about the project because they said, well, at least there's something good that's ongoing from this. And
that must have been difficult.
It must
be really difficult to meet her parents.
And I haven't been particularly exposed to things like that in the past. Obviously, I've been experienced to my own issues with grief and family members passing away and stuff like that. But I've never had to. I didn't realise how in depth my career would be in a emotional side. If you talk about a sculptor, you think, oh, they just fanny around with clay and get the odd thing cast.
That's what you do, right?
Yeah, basically what I do 97% of the time. But actually, it isn't. It is very much emotionally involved as well. You know, if I'm sculpting someone's dog and it was their beloved pet they've had 14 years of their life and it tragically died, and it is an emotional thing, and you're suddenly commemorating this thing in bronze. It's going to be around for, well, my foundry say 4,000 years.
Wow.
And then you've got that pressure put on you that then you have to make sure that it looks like that dog and it catches its characteristics. And then it's even worse when it's a human, because then you're having to portray that and envelop all of that kind of emotion and character and substance into that one piece of sculpture. And it is quite a big old responsibility then laid upon your shoulder. And then you have to converse with the family, make sure that they're all happy with it. And obviously it's terribly emotional for them because they're having to bring up sore thoughts and things that hurt to talk about. And so for me, it's been, you're almost kind of counselling at the same time as discussing, and I'm not qualified for that.
So what was your sculpture of?
So basically what then happened was, after I went and visited the family, I then came up with this proposal, the idea of a sculpture. And they didn't want her sculpted per se, they didn't want a portrait of her, but they wanted something representational. So I said she was really into her bagpipes and she was really good at it. And she really wanted to teach her younger sister over the summer holidays, but obviously never got to. And that whole kind of, she was only 13, 14, early teens.
Young, yeah.
So she hadn't gone and climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. She hadn't gone and conquered the world. She hadn't done any. She was just a lovely she was just a lovely young girl who had lovely young girl aspirations. You know, she loved her makeup. She loved playing with her friends and all that kind of stuff. And all that I wanted to then portray was kind of like a positive outlook. And they had this beautiful area that they had intended for it to go to, which was overlooking this beautiful cove, which was where her old house was. So we went and visited this location that they had intended for it to be, and they talked about it being outside the school and outside on this particular hill, and this one location we visited, and was like, this is perfect. Came back and discussed it in front of the committee and showed them my photos and what I collected and my ideas, and they said, well, that all sounds great. By the way, would you mind speaking in front of 280 people at an upcoming event? And I was going, this isn't part of my job role, I didn't think. And so I just said, sod it, I'll do it, of course. And I think it was maybe a month later, they said, well, will you have a sculpture ready? And I said, there's no chance that I'm going to have a sculpture ready. These things take forever, and I've got a backlog of other sculptures that I have to finish. So I went there with basically a concept and a load of notes scribbled on a piece of paper. And then in this black tie event in the middle of Green Park in London, I had to sit there and put my glad rags on and talk in front of 280 people. And the whole lead up to it was just a disaster. And I had literally about 20 minutes to get ready for the whole event afterwards. And
so you're used to running late, are you?
Oh, yeah. It happens, got you. This is a privilege. Turned up and gave my speech. And it talked about, you know, what the family had thought and about, you know, what I was intending to do and intending to sculpt. And I said to the company, I said, well, we've got, this is the one way that you can raise some funds for this, because the Ardonna Foundation is also then going to be, it was set up in Ailey's name, but it's also then going to be going on and supporting other children in the future as a child's charity and fundraising, that kind of thing. And they wanted to raise 75 grand for the whole night. And so I gave my speech and I said, well, we've got a few maquettes, and maquette is a small version. I haven't yet made. This is the concept. This is what I hope for it to look like. We've got a couple of these that are up for auction if anybody's interested. And they had a standing auction, and I think about the beginning, about half the room was blooming standing. They went up in increments. And then by the end,
I've actually never seen a standing.
Neither had I.
Everyone who's interested stands up, do they?
They say, okay, if you're willing to pay £1,000, stand up.
Okay.
So everyone stands up. If you're willing to pay £2,000, obviously people don't sit down.
Yeah.
And 3, 4, 5, and they go up and up and up. And by the end of it, 15 people were still standing at that kind of crux point. And then one of the guys came up to me and said, would you mind selling 50? I said, well, technically my sculptures are meant to be fine art, so I wouldn't do an edition of over 15 anyway. But yeah, that's fine. And so 75 grand was made like that.
Incredible.
And I also said to them, hey, I've got a couple of other sculptures I don't mind donating to the cause. And they had these, it was really fancy, they had these iPads with a silent auction going on behind the scenes. And they made another 10 grand or whatever I think it was. And I think it ended up raising about 95 grand just from these sculptures alone.
Incredible.
And I was like, what is going on? This is absolutely insane. And the guy running it just came up and gave me this blooming great hug and was crying. And it was just wonderful. And the whole evening went so well. And they said, look, now you can do it in life size. So I was like, that was great. And they did incredibly. I think they raised almost £250,000 just that evening alone for this charity. So that whole thing spurred on, and I've been up to see the parents a couple of times since, and I'm working on the maquette now, so it's still not finished yet. So these people, from listening to this really, really powerful story and hopefully believing in me enough, and what my concept was, had literally bought an idea. Mm-hmm. So that for me was quite kind of self-satisfying, I think.
Yeah, very. And that's it. So yeah, that's going to be. I'm sure we'll get to see the pictures once that's all out and unveiled. I mean, what's the kind? No, I'm not holding to you to a time frame, but what is it? 2 years before the full one will be?
They're wanting the full one unveiled, hopefully next summer.
Okay.
So I've got some work to crack on with.
You're going to have to stop going away to other parts of the world. One of the last things I wanted to kind of touch on to finish this podcast, because otherwise we could go on forever. I know that you need to go north, and hopefully your dogs, no, they haven't run away. They're still
staring
looking a
out
bit cold. Maybe they can come inside if they want. We've talked a little bit about you've mentioned your hunting throughout while we've been talking now, but what is hunting to you? What does it look like from day to day? Because it's something that you do quite a lot of, but it's not really as in your face as a lot of people out there. No,
and I don't do it as a sport per se. I do it as a passion and a way of life. I don't like, if I can avoid it, going into a supermarket and buying a piece of meat that you don't know where it's from, you don't know what the whole background is. I like the fact, and I feel a lot of self-pride if I can then provide for my friends and family of things that, from point of viewing an animal, and I've worked really hard to kind of get up to the place where I can then pull the trigger, to butchering it, to processing it, to using all that I can of it, to it then being in my freezer / on my plate. That to me gives me a really good sense of pride, and I'm only taking off the land what I see fit. You know, nothing's wasted with me, and nothing kind of it isn't used, let's say. And I don't want to be part of that whole current situation what we've got in our current
so kind of I think I know what you're going for, the sort of the public portrayal of our community.
Yeah, in the current society where we're happy to go in and buy a packet of meat because it looks like meat. It doesn't look like an animal that hasn't got a face, if that makes sense. And you don't feel people
are comfortable with it because they can dissociate with it.
Yeah, and you dissociate it from being an animal.
Yeah.
Because you're like, oh, it's fine. It's just a pack of chicken, or it's just a blimmin' slab of beef, or whatever. Yeah, because of my experiences over my life, and because of going to Argentina, because of going to live with the Inuits and stuff, I've got such a great appreciation for my food and where it comes from. And I don't ever want to disassociate myself from that. I feel I really respect people if they can go out, if they can take what they need off of the land, no more, no less, feed their family and know exactly what has happened with that animal, where it's come from, that it was healthy, that, tick off all the boxes and actually utilise that whole animal, not just go into the supermarket, buy what they need and happily throw out the rest. We've got such an issue with waste, especially in this country, of, hey, I haven't used the rest of that yogurt, I'm just going to throw it away, it doesn't matter. I don't like that.
There is a cost to all of that. There's a cost to society, there's a cost to land, there's a cost to resources to produce everything.
Yeah.
And there is, I think there is, although I think we're getting better at it, understanding the impact of our consumption. I think there's a lot more people recycling than there was 10 years ago. We actually have a recycling bin, whereas when I was a kid, there was no recycling bin as part of your household. I think down south they've got like 3 or 4 different recycling bins. We've only got one, so which everything goes into. But as someone who makes the decision to go and hunt, you are the most in control of that part of your life, that meat consumptive part, than any other way.
Yeah, and you develop such a great respect from where your food comes from. And I was horrified the first time I had to go out and slaughter a goat in Argentina. I was absolutely horrified. I just thought, this is the worst thing ever. And then after a couple of months went by, I was like, I understand now why they don't see this as being cruel or evil. It isn't at all. It's done as quickly and efficiently as possible.
And it's a way of sustaining life.
It is literally a way of sustaining life. They're all happy little animals. They're completely blissfully unaware. They're not intensively farmed and they haven't had horrible lives. They've been running around in thousands of acres or hectares, let's say, of literally as wild as you can pretty much get. And,
it's like wild agriculture, that.
It almost is, yeah. And so that was the wild agriculture side of things. And then when I got back, I was then more accepting of the fact that actually I don't feel guilty if I'm hunting, and no one should be. And I'm not a trophy hunter. That doesn't particularly interest me. I see its benefits in society, and I understand why people do it, and it's fantastic for that kind of aspect, and pouring more money into animals,
different communities and different. With a lot. We've talked about the benefits of that, particularly in places like Africa on the podcast before.
And I don't. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. But that's just not where I come from.
That's not the reasons you do it.
No, I go out because I want to be able to provide my friends and family with meat that I know where it's come from, and that I know that I haven't put anything to waste, and I have respected the animal, and I have, done it as quickly as possible. And I know if I were an animal, what I'd rather be doing.
Yep.
Running around like that roadie we just saw.
Yep. I'm still waiting for him to pop out
having
again.
a lovely time running around some fields and.
We will be having a lovely time at this time of year because there's lots of lovely ladies running around that he's rather interested in.
and in woodlands and whatever it may be, as opposed to being some poor intensively farmed bloody cow that never gets to see the sunlight, and that breaks my heart. And what the antis, let's say, don't appreciate is I've never met more animal lovers in the hunting industry than anywhere else. You'll never meet as many people that, for instance, since day dot, I've been rescuing little animals that have broken their legs. And
a lot of people don't realise that is what goes on.
No, we are the biggest animal loving community I'd have probably said out of anybody. Yeah. And every single year I'd have blue tits that I'd rescue that had fallen out their nests, and eventually let them go into the wild, and barn owls and blimmin' baby foxes and whatever. And it's not all going around and murdering and killing and being really evil. That is not the case.
It's about understanding the landscape and the wildlife. And I'm incredibly conscious, especially as we get into the winter months, of the effect of the weather conditions on the animals that live around me. And I'm always trying to find a way that I can try and help a little bit. That might be in the instances of, if you're looking after a population of deer, that might be finding ones that are weak and you'd think are probably not going to last throughout the whole winter. It could be a simple thing as putting some bird food out, which a lot of people do, but the right kind of food for wild birds, that not necessarily little garden birds, but grey partridges and whatever else might be there. It does give you a different appreciation.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I do have issues with, one of my biggest supporters, I always say, is one of my best friends who's a diehard vegetarian. And she said, Jenna, as long as I don't see it, I don't want to see it happen, but I completely understand your reasoning. I completely understand where you're coming from. And I almost feel like at some point, in a weird, eclectic kind of way, those kind of vegetarian, vegans, whatever, the animal lovers, will almost kind of merge with the proper hunters, the meat hunters.
I totally agree.
We're both coming at it from the same point of view, where we are wanting to preserve, we're not wanting animals to suffer. We're not wanting them to live these horrible lives and be injected with all kinds of crap and eat grain and not live naturally. And it was almost quite nice that the two do actually run together.
They are diverging.
Yeah.
When there are some people who just don't like the idea of any meat, and that's slightly different. But when the reasons for making those kind of life choices of not eating meat is due to animal welfare, then there is actually no difference between the hunter and that person. Yeah. There's no difference, because that is very much the reason that so many people hunt.
And they're both completely ways of life. They're not just, I'm going to go out and do it for fun.
It's dedication.
It is dedication and complete passion and a way of life for these people. And that's why I then completely understand the reasoning of my friend, because she does it for the animal welfare. She did eat meat when she was a child, but she said, no, I don't like animal suffering, and I just choose to honour that. I couldn't be a hunter. I just couldn't do it. And I completely respect that. But she goes, well, I respect and I understand. She used to come on our Scotland holidays every year.
Oh, really?
Every year. And she sent me photos of these deer that were walking around while we were up trekking our blooming butts away on hills and whatever. And she'd go, a load of deer have just come in.
The only counter to that, and there needs to be an increasing realization amongst people who make that choice, which is absolutely fine and fair and well if you're making the choice of not eating meat for those reasons. But to think that your hands are clean because you're not actually killing the animal that you're consuming is just a complete fallacy, and it's
that's
in La La Land.
Yeah.
Because we've had this conversation many times on the podcast, but it doesn't matter what you consume on the planet. Somewhere, somehow, you're going to have blood on your hands.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's
from a crop. It doesn't matter what it is.
From a soya crop,
or just barley. Your wheat and your barley and in your bread, your maize. There is going to be something dying, whether it's a pesticide or pigeons being shot over crops,
or a roe deer being run over by a.
What about rats and mice being poisoned around just food storage areas?
Yeah,
something is dying.
The problem with our society is, as long as they don't see it, they feel like it's not happening. And I've had people where I've been on hunts before, and they've come up walking their dogs or whatever, and they go, "Oh, you're so cruel and you're so evil." I go, "Okay, well, are you a vegetarian? Have you committed your life then to not eating meat because of that reason?" No, you're still wearing leather shoes. You're still going down to McDonald's and eating some poor intensively farmed cow, just the same as everybody else is. But you're just not kind of. You're too much of a sheep to then be like, oh, I'm actually part of this issue.
They've detached themselves from it because that's the only way they can feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Because really, even me, and I'm very aware of it, when you start to dig into certain aspects, and I have some stuff in my freezer that I haven't killed myself. I don't solely eat things I've killed myself. I try and weight it towards that, but I was going to say it's not always possible. That's a lie. With the right will, it would be, but that's the choice that I make. Although I do try and get all locally sourced meat and vegetables to try and reduce that kind of footprint. But I've completely lost the track of where I was going with that. Brain fart. I think that's one BrewDog beer.
Too many.
One BrewDog beer too many. But yeah, anyway, people need to realise what they're...
It's about disassociating themselves.
Disassociating people disassociate themselves. But when... I remember where it was. But even myself, when you really start to look into certain aspects, even like soya, you start to look into that and you realise the detrimental impact that makes. And now I'm looking, well, I've got to pick up packets and make sure there's no soya in there.
Yeah.
Or tuna.
Yeah.
I freaking love to eat tuna. And I still eat it, but I always make sure that it's got the right stamps on the
It's been
back, and it's
line
line
caught,
caught.
yeah.
But even still, maybe I should just stop eating it, because I do feel guilty when I'm eating it, and I don't know why I haven't stopped yet. I mean, I need to rationalize that in my brain, but I am at least taking some steps towards making sure that I'm eating stuff that is as sustainable as possible. But we have big issues with tuna globally.
Yeah.
And there's lots of little things like that, and it upsets me.
Yeah, and we're all guilty of it. And I, on the way up here, I went out and bought a sandwich from Marks and Spencer's, and I don't know where the hell that animal's bloody come from. We all do it, and I can't say I solely eat that.
No.
And I don't know if anybody can nowadays, especially in the Western world as well. But as long as you're more conscious about it, like getting what you're saying about the tuna, or I like to, especially over the winter months, I won't buy chicken. I'll get the
pheasant.
I used to drive my mum crazy. I'd come back with a load of pheasants and start plucking them in her kitchen. She was like, "Jenna, this is so annoying." But that was
feathers everywhere.
Yeah, but I'd be like, "Yeah, but look, Mum, what I've got from it. I've now got all of these lovely pieces of meat, and we can swap them for
Talking
chicken."
of pheasants, look down at that fence line down there.
Oh gosh, the dog's going to be
About
over there.
6 or 7 of them.
And
but yeah, that's the kind of living with the change of the seasons is as best as we can do.
And I've got fish in my freezer that probably been there a little bit too long, but I've line caught myself, and I haven't gone and killed a bloody turtle to do it. And I really kind of love that whole living off the land aspect. And I know, like Ray, my boyfriend, for example, he has his own vegetable garden. They've got their own goats, and
that's proper old man. That.
And I love it.
He's sitting at the table with us right now. He's been listening to us rattling on.
And I just think that kind of thing is just so cool. And the more I can do that, and the more I can be self-sustaining, the more happy I will be. And I think that's where we should all be going. And I'd love to be able to educate people and to be able to say that we're not all Cecil the Lion killers, and we're not all going off after this and just doing it just to pull the trigger and just to draw blood. Some of us are doing it as a way of life.
And we were talking about before we actually started recording, there are people who that is what they're there for. And we as the sort of hunting community need to acknowledge that and not try and always dress it up with BS justification.
Yeah.
Let's actually look at it for what it is and work out where it's great and where it does a good thing, and maybe criticize things that are maybe not so savoury.
There is almost two types of hunting that personally I think that exist. Is there almost a sporting type of hunting where you're going out and you want to go kill a lion. Yes, it's fantastic because you're putting more money into the animals and helping the anti-poaching and all that kind of stuff. Fantastic. That's not what I do. There's also the passion hunting, which is I do this as a way of life to feed my family, and because I'm going to utilise every part of the animal, and because I want to know what goes into my food system. And they're almost completely different. Mm-hmm. They're still using, you're still going out, you're still pulling the trigger, you're still doing that kind of thing, but you're doing it for two different reasons. It's fine that we acknowledge that side exists and that side exists as well, but we can work alongside each other, I'm sure, but they are different. Mm-hmm. So, and I just think that people aren't educated enough to know that there is that difference there, and they just think that we're all just evil and horrible and enjoy seeing animals die or whatever, and that isn't the case.
Yeah, and I think there also needs to be a sort of a greater realization of the realities of a balance in our landscape, if there is truly such a thing as a balance, when the human hand touches everything. And if we want to go back to a situation where we are not forced to kill things for management and balance, then we need to remove ourselves from the equation. Because the reality of the wild is that animals kill each other. Yeah,
and they existed well before we came along into the equation.
And that is just how life is sustained. And it will continue doing that long after man is gone.
And you don't criticise a dog for going off and killing a rat, because that's it's instinctive, isn't it? That's in its DNA. And
it's in ours.
Back a couple hundred years, your blooming grandparents, my grandparents, everybody's great-grandparents, wherever it would have been, that's the way we lived. We
were all hunters.
Yeah, that is us in our DNA, and it's kind of intrinsically there. So we don't criticise dogs for doing it. I watched this absolute crappy video the other day and saying, "Oh, but we don't have long canines like dogs, so clearly we weren't actually meant to be hunters." And I was like, "We do have canines.
We do have canines, yeah."
And they said, "Oh, we don't have claws and we don't kill things with our mouths. I was like, yes, because we're intelligent enough to use different aspects.
Yeah, we use tools.
Yeah, tools to make life easier and to make it quicker and more efficient. And he was going on about how, you know, we clearly weren't meant to be hunters, and I just said, no, but we are. That is in our DNA. That's just the way it is. And people choose to live a meat-free life. They choose to live. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. And good on them for doing so, and good on them for sticking to their guns. But it isn't. You know, we've all got to appreciate and respect other people's views too.
I always find that the most laughable thing is, well, we don't need to do that in a modern society. Yeah, but what's worse?
Yeah.
And then we can rewind the conversation back to how we very first started, which was your time in South America. You know, what is worse? And I would say that rewinding the clock back to simpler times, where we were in control of our entire environment around us, where it was our hand that put the meat on the table, which is essentially what hunters are, is a much more sustainable, ethical, moral way of living on the planet than the modern society that we have moved into.
Yeah, I used to work at this tiny little, it was almost like a little shack, and it was a cafe in this woods, Wilderness Woods, in where I used to live.
What country are we in now?
Oh, in East Sussex.
There's a shack in the woods called Wilderness Woods.
They had this, and it was a little tiny cafe, and it was so cool, and they were very kind of, had locally sourced venison and locally sourced pork, and everything was locally sourced, so everything was made on site, whatever, and it was wonderful. And they had this one guy come in, and he was talking about supermarket waste. And he said, we are completely, the wall is over our eyes in these kind of things. You cannot comprehend how many things go to waste in supermarkets, whether that be carrots, whether that be bananas, or whether that be chicken and meat. And the minute that shelf life is off, I go from shelf life, inverted commas, by touch, smell, sight.
Smells my take.
I don't know.
That tastes sour.
Yeah, and then Ray hates it. I'll rub a bit of vinegar on it, it'll be fine. And he's just like...
Curry it.
Yeah, and it'll be absolutely fine. And I don't like seeing things go to waste, so I just do everything I can to avoid that. Yeah, we just shove it in a curry for a couple of hours and it'll be absolutely A-okay. But the amount of even animal products, eggs, whatever, goes to waste because it's just shoved on the shelf and
the date passes
and that's it. Whereas I know that everything that I've, from the minute pulling the trigger to gutting it and cooking up the liver and cooking up the heart, I don't particularly like kidneys, eggs, the dogs or whatever, but at least every single part of that has been used, and I've respected that animal, and it's had a very, very quick ending. And
it wasn't stamped with a sell by date.
And it wasn't part of. It almost makes them not animals anymore. I feel like the supermarket thing. It almost makes them
absolutely does. Yeah.
I think that's so sad. It's because now they don't have a face and it's just an item in a plastic packet. People can disassociate it from that, and I think that's such a shame. As
a kind of a final thought, or towards a final thought, closing this up. I was reading somewhere the other day about packaging, and there's this one drive and school of thought towards packaging where we need to start reducing it, which is or at least making it 100% recyclable. Which I was actually this is a complete side note now, but I was quite disturbed. I was listening to, I think it was a Radio 4 program about recycling, and they were saying that you think that all the stuff you stick in that bin that's outside there is going to be recycled, but depending on what part of the country you're in, determines the kind of recycling plant there is. So some of them can't process material, like two materials. So if you have, for example, you've bought some pasta that comes in a cardboard box with a little cellophane window, you think, oh, that's great, recyclable cardboard. Some places of the country, they can't recycle that because it has a piece of plastic connected to cardboard. So whenever there's two different materials connected, so that goes straight into landfill. So you've stuck it in there, but it's been siphoned off in the processing and sorting, and hasn't been recycled at all.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of people around for barbecues all the time. I love hosting, and I've introduced so many people to actually what you've just eaten is venison, or actually what you've just eaten is hare.
Surprise!
Surprise! And they're like, oh my gosh, I thought I'd hate it. And I'm like, no, it's not. As long as you've cleaned it out well and you've done all you need to do to it, it's the most delicious meat you can possibly think of. Or this is hare, or this is pheasant, and they go, oh, I thought that was just chicken. I'm like, it's way more juicy, way more yummy, whatever. But then I've been shocked when I go to And I've picked up my asparagus locally, and it's come in a little tiny paper bag, and that can go in the recycling, whatever it may be. But then I've been shocked when I go to friends' houses, and they've gone and bought their burgers from Tesco's, and they've gone and bought the chicken from wherever, and the amount of plastic waste you have after one single barbecue for maybe even 8 people. And it's
crazy.
You think of every single household as doing that. It's absolutely disgraceful, actually. And yes, most people nowadays recycle, and that's wonderful. But as you say, you don't even know if that's truly being recycled anymore.
And this is the other side of the packaging, is that we've got one side pushing towards 100% being able to recycle, which is all fine and well. But the other side of it, which is designing packaging for this society that wants to continually be more disconnected to their food by not even handling it anymore.
Yeah.
And this was another thing I was listening to, is they're designing packaging for meat so that people can put it in a frying pan or process it to the next step to cooking, so that they don't have to put their hands on the meat, because people don't like it anymore.
Well,
I mean, I'm sorry, but if you are not prepared to put your hands on the meat, never mind actually take the life of the animal that you're going to kill, you shouldn't be eating meat.
Which is why almost people that shock me, they're like, oh, I don't want to go into butchers because I don't like the fact that blokes have touched my meat. And I'm like, you've not seen the abattoir. Just because you haven't seen it, you don't realise actually how horribly that animal was handled before.
It's pathetic, isn't it?
And you're
How
trying
did they
to
think it got into the packet?
Exactly. And you just think that packaging that it's been sitting in has still been handled before it got into that packaging.
Yeah.
And that to me is just honestly, we're trying to live in this very clinical society where everything's perfectly clean and nothing has been touched or nothing has been tainted or got any bacteria on it, and everybody's so like, oh, it must be antibacterial, it must be this and that, I must wash my
killing
chicken.
us.
And it is, and it's making us ill, and people are getting more blooming allergies and I just think that's such a shame. I know, because I've cleaned my meat myself. I kept my meat clean from the minute it's been dressed all the way through to thing. I know that my meat is clean, and I know my hands are clean, and I trust myself that everything's been done as well as possible. Yet you're prepared to let a complete stranger bolt an animal on the head, let it have a stressful life in that abattoir, then someone else put their hands on it and package it, and then someone else hold that package and then take it to.
But then you don't want to put your hands on it.
You don't want to put your hands on it yourself. I find that absolutely ludicrous.
And that is the problem.
Yeah.
And on that note, we will leave our listeners with that to think about. Thank you very much for taking the time to divert your way on, divert to here on your way north.
I'm sorry, I'm a whole day
to come
late.
To come and have a podcast with us. It's been great to speak to you. I'm glad that we've had the opportunity, and hopefully we have a chance to speak again soon. Hopefully we have a chance to hunt soon.
Yes,
sometime.
that would be wonderful, and have a nice barbecue as well.
Well, if you actually come on time, then we would have been.
Sorry,
Jenna, thank you very much.
Some beer. Thank you so much.
And that is it for another 2 weeks. If you would like to see what we're up to and message us, email us, or anything like that, then you can get hold of us on Instagram. We also put up a huge amount of pictures on there from what we're up to, and also we do a lot of stories and live videos, and on Facebook as well. And our email address is podcast@paceproductionsuk.com. I think I forgot to mention the handle, so it is pace_brothers on Instagram. The podcast Facebook page is just Podcast Into the Wilderness, and then we also have a Pace Brothers Facebook page, and that we put up a lot of kind of articles and pictures from Instagram that get uploaded onto there. So.
Mm-hmm. And don't forget to go and get involved with the charity auction for a whole bunch of Hornady and CZ gear that we're giving to the guys.
We'll make sure we put up links as soon as that more details come out about that. I was going to mention something else. I'm not too sure what it was now. Modern Huntsman Volume 2 is on pre-order, so
our articles are submitted. They're done, dusted, and
our pictures are submitted and everything. So there's going to be a whole bunch of stuff from us in it. We will be bringing in a load into the country, and if it's anything like last year, if your name isn't on first, then you'll have to wait.
Yeah, we're bringing a lot in, but
we're bringing in a lot more.
It's hard to know.
Yeah,
because the demand for Volume 1 was so ridiculous. But there has been some people already, actually quite a number of people already got Volume 2 on pre-order from us. Yeah, so that is the safe bet.
And there's been a number of people that have also just bought them both at the same time, and they were just waiting to get them both.
Yeah.
So there's lots of options on the website. It is thepacebrothers.com. nice and easy to remember. And thank you to the people that have been leaving us reviews. I've noticed that there's been reviews being left, and it is greatly appreciated leaving reviews from all over the world, because they are location specific. So if you're from Australia or New Zealand or any places like that, then you'll only see those reviews from that countries, and there'll be some countries.
It's silly that they do that, actually.
Yeah, it is silly, but it means that in some locations around the world, we might only have 1 or 2 reviews.
Yeah, so if you live in South Korea and you only see 1 review, it's because we only have 1 South Korean listener.
Yeah, but no, definitely leave us a review. It helps out massively for more people learning about the show. Should we give away some stickers this week? Some podcast
can do.
stickers?
Can you think of another section of society? We've given away to farmers. We've given away to females who are involved in hunting and fishing.
Gamekeepers.
We've given away to gamekeepers.
I
was going to say gun dog owners, but that's just so many people.
That's nearly everyone.
Nearly everyone.
That was nearly every single person. 1 per dog as well. Could you imagine this household? We've given out 7, 8 stickers in one go. I'm just trying to think. Who should we give it away to?
I think we might have to leave that for the next one. We will give some more away, and we will talk about it at the start of the next show.
Yeah, we'll remember. But thank you very much for listening. Join us again in 2 weeks' time.